We pay our respects to and acknowledge all Indigenous peoples of this earth, past, present and future. We pay our respects and acknowledge First Nations people throughout this land known as Australia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders past, present and future, and all people on this earth past, present and future. Podcast episode 172, Trigger Warning. In this podcast episode, reference is made to self-harm. If this causes you distress, please seek help. Contact Lifeline Australia on 13 11 14 or your local suicide prevention services or your nearest emergency services or hospital.
Hi everyone, it's Yvette Blowitz from SPAITGIRL.com and welcome to Feel Good From Within. I'm super excited to be here with you today and our very special guest, Callaghan, who is the author of The Dreaming Path, Indigenous Thinking to Change Your Life. He's co-authored this book with Uncle Paul Gordon, and today we're going to be talking about how it's time to reconnect with your story, caring for our place and the importance of story, relationships, sharing and unity, love, gratitude, humility, learning and living your truth, inspiration and resilience, being present. Are you ready to connect with the dreaming path, to heal, renew, and live a good story? Paul Callaghan, welcome to the Spirit Girl podcast show. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks, Yvette, and hello everybody out there. I hope you're having a wonderful day, because every day is wonderful if we look at it that way.
Congratulations on the launch of your book. I'm holding it up here. It's out now, The Dreaming Path. It's been published by Pantera Press. How does it feel to see me holding up your book?
Before I answer that question, I will just acknowledge country and acknowledge all those ancestors that have cared for our country for over 60 to 100,000 years throughout this wonderful, wonderful land. And in terms of my way of thinking, and it's just my way of thinking, their spirits are still there and they're with us. And when we acknowledge them, it makes them happy. So I acknowledge those old ones and also our elders and leaders, past and present in country and showing us the way, and our future leaders. And in terms of you holding up that book, I'm still scratching myself. The book came out on the 1st of February. It's received thousands of likes on the various Facebook pages. I've always had a dream from years ago to have a book published, and I saw it sitting in an airport bookstore, and that's happened. So I'm still scratching myself. I find it hard to believe that it's actually out there. I find it hard to believe that people are talking to me about it. And I must say, when I reread it to remember what I've said, I find it hard to believe that I've written some of the things. I really think that I've been used as a channel for wisdom that's older than me to come through. And it's something I feel really good about. And certainly part of writing this book was to share with the world the wisdom of Uncle Paul Gordon, who is a very special person to me. And I've quoted him directly in the book, and it's really satisfying to know that people are reading his words the way he says them, and that the words are resonating in a very profound way.
You have had such great reviews, the both of you, for The Dreaming Path. And I'll read out this incredible quote by Dr. Bruce Perry, who is the co-author with Oprah Winfrey of What Happened to You. I love this beautiful book. This should be required reading for anyone entering a leadership position in any walk of life. This is another one from Joe Williams. He's an advocate and author of Defying the Enemy Within. He says, this book is a must for every family home. It's a peek inside the life and understanding of the old ways, which have the potential to unite a country. I've read your book personally and absolutely loved it. And one of the things throughout the pandemic that I really wished for and hoped for was that a book like this would exist, because I thought to myself, especially being Aboriginal myself, for everyone who's joining in, my father's from the Butchulla tribe, and throughout the pandemic, I felt like there were all of these other people from different countries talking about their ancient culture. things to do with mindfulness, mind, body, spirit, the importance of connecting to country and the nature. And I thought, wow, that is Aboriginality to its core. And what I love now is that anyone in the world can learn how to share their story, how to connect with their own environment and country, and how to take care of their own mind, body, spirit during any crisis. One of your favorite saying is, don't waste a good crisis. Another thing I want to point out here with your book, which was an easy read, and I really loved learning about your own story and your own self-care rituals, but there was something that really was maybe a message I've been searching for all my life, written by Uncle Paul Gordon. And it says, being Aboriginal is not the colour of your skin, but your connection and responsibility to country and all things in nature. It is about your connection to trees, fish, birds, rivers, rocks, and stars. It isn't about how you look. It isn't even about your bloodlines. It is about something unseen and deep inside you. And I thought, it was like a big weight had lifted off my shoulders. Finally, Uncle Paul Gordon has taught all of us what really being Aboriginal is all about. And that for me was a message not ever really received from the media or at school. I often just got asked, so what percentage are you? Are you 1/10? How much blood? How much have you got of it in your blood? Is it 1/4, a half? Are you 1/10? So to take all of that away and going back to the core values of what Aboriginal means, I feel now that everybody is welcome to really embark on their own journey of connecting to country, story, and the values. So, Paul, before we dive into your book, are you happy to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
I grew up and my mother's Aboriginal, my dad's not Aboriginal. And so Dad's always kind of said, oh, how come you always connect more with the Aboriginal side of the family? And I said, well, I love both sides of the family, but I grew up on Cooroa Mission, which is an hour north of Newcastle. And that was where I found my connection and my peace, I guess, even though my non-Aboriginal aunties and uncles were quite dear to me, I always connected with the mob. So when I grew up, I wasn't sure how to explain that other than I was Aboriginal. Then as I got a bit older, it became the in thing to say we were Koori, and that was okay. And then it became okay to say I'm from the Worimi nation, which I am, and our totem is the dolphin. And then in recent years, it's become even safer as we learn more. We're able to share our stories. I'm actually from the Gambapingal clan of the Worimi people of the Gadung-speaking nations of Australia. So that's how much Australia is changing in terms of Aboriginal people being able to share our story and feel comfortable. It's a wonderful thing. It means that I can feel comfortable in my skin, which I didn't always feel. Even though I was Aboriginal, I didn't feel that Aboriginal growing up because I felt there was a part of me missing. And it wasn't until I became quite successful in the Western world with a degree in commerce and working in a university and a diploma in surveying and a diploma in drafting, 3 kids and a house and a beautiful wife. But I fell down with a nervous breakdown and I had depression and I was going to kill myself. And I really struggled to move out of the darkness, and the medical system told me that I was permanently disabled. The system told me that I would never recover and I'd probably never work again. And I thought, well, the only way to fix this is to kill myself so my wife can be free and my kids can be free. So for anyone out there that may be triggered by what I've said, please reach out for help because it's not a good place. And at the time when I went to kill myself, a thought came to me that said, no, you don't have to do this. You can prove everybody wrong and you can heal, and you can use that healing to show others how this can be done. So don't believe the labels. I did that, and for years I read a lot of self-help books from throughout the world. I had a voracious appetite for reading about spirituality throughout the world, and I found universal wisdom that helped me a lot. But a part of me yearned to learn about my culture, and I was told by well-meaning people our culture was dead. And thankfully they were wrong. it was there, it was just sleeping. And it was with people who had been given the law and the culture to hold on to, and they were waiting for the right people to share it with. And thankfully, I was one of those that they picked and said, would you like to come bush? And then my world totally changed from the first moment when I was shown a site and knowledge and story given to me. This awakening started within that's been burning strongly for over 2 decades now. And where the book came from was I realised that the things I had been given, although they were hundreds of thousands of years old, or at least 60,000 years old, I could apply them in the contemporary world. And I found that as I applied them, my life became a lot easier. And I found that when I shared this knowledge with non-Aboriginal people, they found that their life became easier. I started a new job in TAFE, New South Wales in 1997, and I found I kept on getting promotions, and I couldn't figure out why, because all I was doing was following the learning I'd been given out bush. And I ended up being, after several years, I became the first Aboriginal CEO of a TAFE institute. And I had 23,000 students, and I ran a $60 million budget, and I had 1,200 staff, and we were awarded the best institute of the year, the 3rd year into my role, and we were voted top 3 in Australia. So it occurred to me that all this wisdom is there for all of us. And so I said to Uncle Paul one day, do you mind if I write a book where I can share your beautiful wisdom with the world? Because the world needs to listen to it. And it's not to replace all the other wisdom I've been given in terms of Hinduism and Buddhism and other beautiful books. It's there to sit beside, because all of those books have beautiful universal wisdom for us. When I first wrote the book, which was at the start of COVID, and I was actually laid up in a lounge with deep vein thrombosis at a point where a doctor told me, you could drop dead in any second, we need to get you to hospital immediately. But I used that time of being incapacitated to write this book, and it had me reflecting on how lucky I was that I could share this wisdom. And when I wrote it, initially it was to provide individuals with insight on how they can live a life of improved contentment and well-being, particularly in Australia, so that non-Aboriginal people could feel that they were part of this country. But then as I wrote it, it became more of an ideal for me to create unity and reconciliation, not only within Australia, but across the world. And talking to Uncle Paul about it and your feelings of connection with country, he explained it to me this way, and I will say to people, this is just my views and Uncle Paul's views based on what we've been given by old people, and we respect other people's views. There's no one right view. But it's a beautiful way to think. And he said, well, we've been on this country for a long time, and we know this country and we love this country. And the way the old people explain it is, the earth is our mother, and without our mother, we would perish. There'd be no life without a mother. And they say, if I give to my mother, if I love my mother, if I learn about my mother, if I care for my mother, if I dance for my mother, if I sing for my mother, then she will always give me what I need. And that's what Mother Earth does. She always gives us what we need. Just like an unborn baby inside a mother's tummy doesn't have to worry about anything. Our spirituality says if we care for the mother, she will always give to us. And out of that comes the concept of the dreaming path and the law. And they're the same thing. The law is a Western world, and our Aboriginal word for that is in eastern New South Wales and mid New South Wales is the Nyurimpa. And it's about caring for our place and all things in our place. And the law comes from our mother, and it belongs to the mother. It belongs to the country, not the people. We happen to be the custodians of the law. We share the knowledge, but the knowledge belongs to the country. Now, why that is such a beautiful thing, that it means that people that are living on this country can be part of this country too, and they can share in this law, and we are happy to share that. I provide a broader framework of understanding so people can explore at a local level with local elders. So I'm not trying to take over from local elders. It's me providing, hopefully, the inspiration for people to go and search locally for elders and listen to their stories and find out about their country. And when they do, they'll find out there are common values across this country, such as I care for my place and all things in my place, such as I must always love, respect, be humble, and always share. By doing that, Paul and I are hoping that people will feel comfortable from wherever they are to sit around the fire with us and be with us and connect to country. Because when you look at Australia, Aboriginal people are seen as socio-economically disadvantaged, and the data says that. And I've just finished a PhD that captures all of that and talks about what we need to do. But on the flip side, for most Aboriginal people, we are spiritually advantaged because we have our connection with our culture. And it's not about the colour of our skin. A cup of coffee, you can put as much milk in it as you like, it's still coffee. It's about what's inside. So we connect with our country. So even though we're socioeconomically disadvantaged, most of us are spiritually advantaged. And yet, on the flip side, for a lot of non-Aboriginal people, they may well be socioeconomically advantaged, but they're spiritually disadvantaged. By bringing the two worlds together, we can all share socioeconomic and spiritual advantage. And when you look at the history of Australia, 1788 wasn't a good time for Aboriginal people, but it also wasn't a good time for those that were brought here. A lot of those people were enslaved and they were surrounded by trauma that passed on as well. And so a lot of Australia is founded on trauma, black and white. And also we have, thankfully, a lot of people coming into this country from other places in the world now. And it's just wonderful. And I find that they make particularly good audiences in terms of listening to culture because they are actively interested. But also they bring a lot of trauma for where they've come because they've come hoping for a better place. So this is a wonderful opportunity through the understanding that culture provides through the Dreaming Path book that we've written and other books, and also sitting down with elders. It's a wonderful opportunity for all of us to have an identity where we do connect with this land and where Aboriginal law and culture can be respected and understood and acknowledged in the appropriate place it should be, which is the world's oldest living culture.
Paul, that was beautifully said. I feel the Dreaming Path book that you have brought during the pandemic was really divine timing, because I've been listening to so many people who are wanting to feel spiritually connected. And for us growing up on the land and understanding the importance of Mother Earth and caring for the land and connecting to the sky and the clouds and the trees and the wind and the rocks, and knowing that we come from the land, we return to the land, that we're all visitors on Mother Earth here temporarily, having this experience that we don't own the land owns us. But for someone who hasn't had that upbringing or knowledge, the Dreaming Path now allows them, anyone in Australia or globally, to develop a relationship with Mother Earth, because climate change is big. So many people want to take action with looking after the earth now, Mother Earth, and that's a core value of the Aboriginal culture of the 60,000 years. And so many people want to feel connected with nature because they're so disconnected by working in cubicles, looking on their mobile phone. They've become totally disconnected with the earth. Are you able to talk about how really walking was a pivotal part of Aboriginal culture, but it's also something that all of us can embrace when it comes to our own health and wellness? Are you able to talk about how the Aboriginal tribes used to walk and travel the country to conduct big ceremonies? And they also had several places throughout Australia which were called sit-down places.
Well, I'll start with the Dreamtime story. And when I tell this story, it's important to understand in our way that we can have several Dreamtime stories about the same thing. And the Western scientific world goes, but how can they be all true? There's 5 stories about how the echidna got its spikes. Which one is the truth? And our old people will say they're all true. And the Western world will go, but they can't be. And our old people will say, no, they're all true. What's your problem? Because we take in good story and we say that works, that helps, that gives us guidance, and we believe in it. We don't question it. This creation story is one of possibly many, but I'll tell it for the world audience to have an understanding of how beautiful country is. So this is called the creation story. So in the beginning, there was a ball of water sitting in the sky, but under the water was the earth mother. So that's how the earth began in this story. It was a big ball of water. And the rainbow serpent was inside the mother, and the rainbow serpent started to move and wriggle. And the mother said, oh, that feels a bit funny. I'm going to have to rise. And so she rose and she rose and she rose, and then she burst through and the waters broke and the mother was born. And while the rainbow serpent was wriggling, and that's a symbol of sperm and egg and rising. So the mother was born, and it was the first time that she'd felt air. But in the meantime, our creation father, who had been in the universe in the sky forever, was watching, and he looked and he saw it happen and he went, wow, I've never seen anything like that. That's the most beautiful thing in all the years I've been here watching over the universe. That's the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I must go down and see what that is. And so he did. He came to Earth, and there are big sites all through Australia where we'll say that's where the father stood. And people will say it in different ways, but he came to Earth and he met the mother. And he spent time with the mother and they fell in love. But like all things, our father had to go back to the sky because he has responsibilities. And we have that in life. There are times we want to be somewhere, but we know we've got to go. And so the father wasn't happy that he had to go back into the sky, but he accepted his responsibilities. And so he said to the mother, I must say goodbye. And there are places in Australia where you can see where the stories say this is where the father went back to the sky. And he comes back to Earth every now and then to reconnect with their love. But part of that story is there was this beautiful love between them and they'd made love. And so the mother was pregnant and she gave birth. And she gave birth to everything you can think of. She gave birth to the birds, she gave birth to the dolphins, she gave birth to the fish, she gave birth to the trees, she gave birth to the birds, she gave birth to all animals. And last of all, humans came into being. So if you think of that story, if all things come from the one mother, we're all family. That's the creation story. So now when we walk country, we don't have to feel alone, because when we walk country, we're reconnecting with our old family. That family's been there for tens of thousands of years, and we don't have to feel lonely. We don't have to feel isolated. And the old people say we were born last to remind us that we should never put ourselves above nature. That all those things that are around us are our older siblings, and they're our teachers and they're our guides, and they'll give us wisdom. So the old people say if we go and sit and be still in the bush, we'll be given all the knowledge we need because we're with family. And this is the importance of relationships. When you look at COVID, what was it that people missed? They missed being outdoors and in country. We don't say on country, we're in country. And they missed outdoors being with other people, relationships. So our relationship, as the Nurumpa says, I must always care for my place and all things in my place. That's the law. I must always care for all things in my place and my place. So we connect with country and it's beautiful. That's why most of us, we go, oh, gee, I need a break. And our place that we go to is somewhere out bush where it's quiet. It could be a mountain, it could be a stream, it could be the ocean, it could be just in the middle of the bush, it could be rainforest, but we all have a place that we love. And that's where our spirit connects, because there are sites that tell us when we want healing, we need to go and connect with country, because our cord that's with our mother, human, when it's severed, it connects spiritually with the earth, and that's where we get our sustenance. So traditionally, our people would always walk country, and every part of country is sacred. And an exercise for people to help them with that is to just take their shoes off every afternoon and rub their feet in the grass and go, wow, this feels great. I'm connecting with my mother. So our people walked country knowingly with gratitude. So everything was beautiful. Like, thank you for that dirt. People think, oh, what are rocks? Well, in our way, rocks have spirit. But rocks over millennia break down into dirt, and dirt grows. And then we eat what grows, or things eat what grows and we eat them. So without rocks, we wouldn't have life. And water comes through the mother too, and it comes from the sky. And without water, we don't have life. So all those things are around us and we give thanks. And so our people did small ceremony every day. If there was a native plum fruiting, there would be a dance and there would be a song and there would be a story and there would be a ceremony to give thanks. As you pulled in a fish, you give thanks because that's your brother. The old people say, you never take more than you need. Don't be greedy. That was done with knowledge, but also we had sacred places where we did sacred ceremony. And what was important there is you can't go into a sacred place dirty. And we're all dirty in terms of anger, disappointment, suffering, pain, ego, illness. And so there would be sit-down places where we would have to sort out our disagreements, and also, if need be, smoking ceremonies, so that our spirit is clean when we go into a sacred place, so we don't make that dirty. Not so different as to when I've been into sacred places throughout the world, such as churches and so forth, where you cleanse yourself with the holy water and things like that. So we need to be clean. So the earth is the most beautiful place and we need to care for it. And it's clear in the last 50 years particularly, we haven't been.
Thank you for sharing that, Paul. That was so insightful, and sharing the wisdom means now all of our listeners have the ability to just take their shoes off, put their feet in the grass and connect to mother, connect to Mother Earth. And I think that is something that people have been really struggling with, especially if they're living in high-rise apartments in the city. I know that there was a big shift throughout the pandemic for people to really connect with the earth and nature, and it's so beneficial for our mental health and well-being. I know it's been transformative for myself to connect to Mother Earth and the ancestors and everything I see and feel, and it's made me feel whole. We're living in times now where we have a world who wants to take or have. There's this need for always wanting more, wanting the latest iPhone, wanting the latest shoes, or wanting the biggest house or the latest car. It's always a material thing we're seeking or wanting. In your book, what was really interesting, you talked about a far better road to contentment is to break the habit of wanting and replace it with the habit of giving. Can you imagine a world of giving rather than wanting? Can you share a little bit more about this philosophy?
For sure. And it comes back again to the title of the book, to make it very clear what the title of the book means. The dreaming path is a concept that says that for Aboriginal people, and I don't expect people to absolutely believe our spirituality, but I expect people to respect it and also to learn from it and say, okay, that has meaning for me. So the dreaming path, which in our word means the neuron path, it's a big picture that says we're conceived in love, we are born in love. We live in love, we are surrounded in love, and when we finish this time on earth, we go back to love. And the old people say, when we leave this world behind, all we leave behind is our story. So make it the best story possible. So that's an important thing to think about. Am I living the best story possible? Most people I see are living a busy story. They'd be all gold medalists in a busy story. But are they living the best story possible? Only you know that. Just before my breakdown, if you measured me on Western terms, I was living a great story. I had 3 qualifications. I had a great job. I was also a lecturer in economics, beautiful children, a house, 2 cars. Wonderful. But I fell apart because it wasn't my story. And what I've seen upon reflection, I discovered this as I did therapy and read books and so forth. I'd spent all my life trying to be all things to all people at all times because I needed to be liked because I didn't like myself. And that came at a great expense. It nearly killed me because I wanted to be liked. So what's really important is to go inside and say, hey, no, I'm actually quite special. I was born in love. I was born for a reason. And statistically, the chances of heads or tails is 1 in 2. The chances of winning lotto is 1 in 2 with 6 zeros. The chances of being born is 1 in 6 with 100 zeros from memory. It's impossible to be born, but we are. We're all so special, and we have to realise that. The hardest journey is to go inside and say, I need to let go of what everyone else's expectations of success is, and I need to go inside and find out who is me. Because the neuron path says I must always care for my place and all things in my place. But within that is freedom to choose. And so how I walk those footsteps are up to me. But the neuron path and the law and the dreaming path says, but if I'm not contributing to caring for my place and all things in my place, I won't find contentment. So if you're doing something that takes away from place, that means you're not caring for other people, you'll probably find deep inside somewhere you'll go, I'm hollow, there's something missing. So it's about reshaping that and going, okay, I need to be reflecting on how do I care for my place and all things in my place. And also, what are my footsteps? So traditionally, I might have been a nurse, I might have been an engineer, I might have been a farmer, I might have been a cook, all those things. So each one of us can embrace that. But unfortunately, from when we're young in the school system, we're taught that success is around fighting each other to be the best in the class, fighting each other to be the top of the HSC, fighting each other to get the best marks so we can get into uni, fighting each other in what is called a competitive merit-based selection process, and then getting into an organisation and fighting each other to go up the ladder in a big economic market called the competitive market. Everything about it is let's fight each other. The Aboriginal world is about let's share with each other. A quote of Uncle Paul's that I really love, he said, while the Western world was building armies, Aboriginal people built relationships. because our definition of richness is relationships. But unfortunately, again, when we're young, we're exposed to all sorts of consumerism where we're told, if I can't have that latest chocolate, I'm not going to be happy. And as we get older, there's nothing wrong with beauty and luxury, but we're told if I don't get the latest beauty technique, and if I'm not as pretty as everyone else with their filters on Facebook, then I don't fit in. And we're taught that if I don't get the latest car, I can't be happy. We're taught all these things that we need to buy or consume in order to be happy. And that's not it. Happiness comes from being you and building relationships with other people, with other things, and with country. And that's why if you look at Aboriginal people, we are what you would call beers. We be. We're in the moment. And we're quite satisfied quite often with very little, as long as we've got love around us. Whereas if you look at the Western world, it's built on kind of wanters. I want, I want, I want, I want. And the problem with wanting is once you have one thing, you'll go, okay, I've got that, I want more. And part of that in the workplace, for instance, I really hate the term work-life balance. It should be just life balance. By making it work-life balance, definitionally, you're saying our life is 50% work. It should not be. Our work is an important thing. It's part of what we do, but it's life balance. So our work, our relationships, our free time, all those things are so important, and we need to look after those. And when I do sit and talk with people and coach them, quite often they'll say, oh, I've turned my life around. It's really good. I'm eating well, so I'm looking after my body. I'm exercising. I'm going great. And I'm doing mindfulness and I'm doing meditations and I'm doing yoga for my mind. And I'll say, good, that's 2 out of 3. What are you doing for spirit? And they'll be horrified and say, oh, haven't thought about that. I thought I had it covered. And I said, no, you've got to do the 3. So if you really do want to do good self-care, you need to think about spirit, what it means to you. It doesn't mean you have to be fearful and go, I have to believe in a religious icon. Some people, that's not their thing, but it's something that's bigger than you. So for me, it's my spirituality. For others, there's other spiritualities. For others, it might be family. For others, it might be just, I want to give. But they're all the kinds of things that we can do. And imagine a world if we did start to give. My research in my PhD, it showed me that we have 7.7 billion people in the world. And there's enough resource to keep us all in a state of well-being. What's missing is the will to ensure that happens. If you look at Australia, we have people who are really well off. We have a growing middle class, which I'm fortunate to be in. And I had to let go of the guilt of that because you can feel guilty. And we have others who are disadvantaged, and I spend my life as a consultant trying to address that. But with this book, I'm trying to create something that's really beautiful based on our beautiful culture that everyone can be part of, whether you're rich in money but poor in spirit. It gives you some insights into how to engage with yourself and then engage in the Western world and live in those 2 worlds. Because in my PhD, what I researched was that without a sense of self and identity, we can't find a place of contentment. We can't actually walk the dreaming path. So this all starts with deep inside, looking at ourselves and saying, who am I? Do I really like myself, let alone love myself? Do I embrace my story? Many of us, when we think about our story and we look to our years behind us, we kind of hide our heads and go, oh, so embarrassing, so many things I wish I wouldn't have done. That's not the way our old people talk about it. They say all we leave behind is our story. So look back on your story and feel good about it and say, that's my story. Now, there are things that I would do different. So what do I need to do to address that? And then address it and then move on and go, no, I'm here and my story's great. And people don't believe that. But when I'm in a room with people, I do an exercise with them where I get them to share story and the room buzzes and people go, wow, I didn't think I had such a good story. We all do. We all have a great story. And so it's important to believe in it and then use that to fuel your next steps.
Use that to fuel your next steps. We all have a story, because that's what I loved about the dreaming path, is going back to that ancient wisdom of story and the importance of building relationships by sharing your story. Thank you, Paul, for sharing your own personal story, especially with the mental health aspects, because here we are today. You've written a book, it's got raving reviews. It is set to help so many people globally and within Australia to feel good from within and to feel more content and just to feel at peace and to feel well. and really connected not only to Mother Earth, but also country, but also people within their own community. And what I love about your story there, Paul, is by opening up and sharing your story and things that you've discovered. In your book, you mentioned we can share the exercise, which is a gratitude diary. You just talked about then how we can walk in country and we can be grateful for everything. I do this practice as well, where I'll be grateful for the blue sky, or grateful for the trees, or grateful that I can even walk. Because I see a lot of people, sadly, who are in wheelie walkers, they age, or wheelchairs, or they don't even have the capacity to walk. How important is gratitude for you in your own day-to-day life?
I've practiced these things for so long, they're just an inherent part of who I am now. But it's important to understand that the mind itself has a tendency to be negative. It's called a negative bias psychologically. So our brain will always look for negatives because negatives are dangerous to us. They put us at risk and they can impact on our well-being. So our brain is wired to look for things that might hurt us. Traditionally, it might have been physically, but now it's also psychologically all around us, and particularly with social media. So it's important to understand that and then try and switch it off or switch it around and say, no, I'm going to be positive. And so some homework for those that are willing to do it, I promise you this is worthwhile, is someone that's close to you. So it might be a partner or it might be a friend, but you need to do this with your voices. So either face-to-face or via phone or Zoom. Every night for 14 nights, contact someone or talk to someone and share all the great things that have happened that day. And in my book, I talk about the TENSE exercise, which I made up. And TENSE stands for your senses. So T stands for tongue and taste. So that's taste, your tongue. E stands for eyes. What have I seen today? N stands for nose. What have I smelt today? S stands for skin. What have I felt on my skin today? And E, what have I heard today? My ears. With that person, go through and share all the great things that have happened that day. If you start to run out, then go through the T, E, and S, E. Say, what have I tasted today? What have I seen today? What have I smelt today? What have I felt? And what have I heard? And with that TENSE exercise, on your own, you can do that at night too and relive all those beautiful things. And you'll find you'll be asleep before you get to N for nose. I do it all the time because I used to be a poor sleeper. But I find that by the time I go through all the things I've tasted that day and all the things that I've seen, I'm off into fairyland because I'm at peace, I'm happy, all the noise and stress are gone. So going back to the partnering up with someone for 14 days, share all the good things and you'll be amazed how many good things that there are. Then after the 14 days or during that time, you'll find that you'll start transforming and you'll start noticing wonderful things as they happen in real time. Because that's the way we are. If we know we're going to share it for that night, we're going, oh, I better start getting some stuff ready. And we'll look around. A perfect example right now is I look outside and my wife is a beautiful gardener and there's the last of the white roses. It's raining this morning and the petals are starting to flow, but how beautiful they've been for the past week. Yesterday out walking, there is this amazing pink hibiscus that's flowering and my phone is full of photographs of amazing flowers. But you're right, the blue sky, the rain in our way, when we have soft rain, that's happy rain. It's the old people crying for joy because they've been remembered. So nothing has to be bleak if we don't see it that way. Everything is wonderful. People say to me, oh yeah, that's a bit starry-eyed. That's not the way the world is. No, there are nasty things that happen in a day. I call them the storms. But if you know there are good things everywhere, then the storm won't take over your day. The negative thing that's happened, such as I missed the train, oh goodness me, I missed the train. But if you start talking to the person next door and suddenly find out they've got an amazing story and you go, wow, I'm inspired. Isn't it great I missed the train, I got to meet somebody. So every day I'm full of gratitude and it's mind, body and spirit. When I eat, I love it, all those things. And so as a result, I buzz around. And where I first saw that, me and Uncle Paul were about to give a presentation in Sydney one day. We were just talking and I said to him, have you ever had banh mi, which is Vietnamese pork rolls? And he went, no. And I said, well, man, you're in for a treat. These are the best things ever. They're the bomb. I got a couple and we're munching on them. And if you could look at us spiritually, we were just buzzing rainbows of colour. We were just on a high, just going, how good's this? And I looked around me and everyone was coated in grey. And I called them the greys and I just went, you poor fellas, you've just got no joy in your life. They're looking up at these buildings like they're going into a jail, and you can kind of almost read their minds going, oh yeah, in 40 years' time, when I get to my super and pension, I get out of this. And that's not what it's about. You need to live in colour every moment of every day, find the magic in every day. And that's what I remember from that day. And I went, yeah, I'm always going to live this way. I'm going to find the joy, even when something shitty happens. That's okay. I won't push it away. I'll say, yeah, that's pretty shitty. But I'll just wait for something to show itself to me, and there it'll be. And I'll go, oh, here we are, we're back on track. And so that's how I live my life every day.
I love how you live your life every day. And I really love that story that you shared in your book about you and Uncle Paul Gordon there, because it was fascinating that you noticed that people weren't smiling. And this is pre-COVID, but you noticed even back then there were people not smiling and saying hello to each other. And I've often said, imagine what the world would be like if we did one basic thing, which is just smile at each other, acknowledge, good morning, how are you? Or even a smile, because we could elevate this joy or happiness and create a much more positive environment. But I've noticed when I go to Sydney or places even in Melbourne, everybody had their head down. They don't look at each other on the tram. They're sort of busy in their work, a lot of stress on their face. And there was no smiling or joy or happiness or, how are you? Good morning. One of the things in your book, which I also loved, and I've made a note of this, laughter is still very much used by Aboriginal people to connect and sustain relationships. And that's something that we've been missing over the last couple of years with COVID, with all the stress and the fear and the lockdowns and the stress of it all. Laughter's so important, isn't it, Paul?
I remember clearly during the midst of my recovery from my breakdown, I was sitting outside my parents' house in a chair and I heard the sound and I kind of went, what's that sound? And it was me laughing. So there was a period in my life where I hadn't laughed for so long, I'd forgotten what it sounded like. And that wasn't me at all. I was always a laughing fellow. And since that time, I've just noticed that when I'm with mob, we just laugh all the time. And it was never more clear than many years ago now, my eldest son came out bush with me to meet cultural people. And we were way out west in the Red Desert. And this is a beautiful thing to think about when we talk about spa and luxury, which I know you're into, and so am I, who doesn't? But going out in that red dust and having a spa in red dust is a really good thing to do for our soul. And when you're out there, if you meet up with elders, get them to do a smoking on you and have a spa and smoke and cleanse yourself. And you'll feel better than any spa you've ever been to. So they're two cultural things that are really beautiful. So we got out to this place and there were camps everywhere. And my son was excited to meet people. And I said, no, just stand still for a second. It was dark. The stars were out, big sky. You could touch the stars. And I said to him, tell me, what do you notice? And he would have been probably 16. And he said, Dad, the sky's full of laughter. And I said, that's right, the sky's full of laughter. And since that time, I've said to different groups, have you ever been anywhere in your life where you can say the sky is full of laughter? And there's a lot of learning in that. It's about going out into space where there's stillness. It's catching up and uniting with other people. It's building relationships. But underpinning that, when you do that, there'll be all this laughter. It's everywhere. When you get with our mob, we've always laughed. And if you look at the film of the old footage, the old people laughed. And in fact, the old people are incredible torments. They'll drive you crazy because they'll torment you. But that's the way they teach. They'll say, oh, yeah, you're not very good at that. Not very good there. And the kid will go, yeah, I'll show you. And there'll be lots of laughter. And so laughing is so important. And I mean, there are even laughter therapists now. The research shows even if you pretend you laugh, the body doesn't know the difference. So when your face starts to smile, the micro muscle starts to trigger stuff in your brain that will start to release endorphins, and it's good for you. So even if you don't feel like laughing, having a pretend laugh can get you into that spot. But also it's really important, all these things need to be disciplined, almost like diarise. We diarise our work life. I think we always need to diarise our happy times, our leisure times. Put them in your diary so that you can make sure you do them. And one of them is laughter. Since I've moved to Old Bay to live now, I have really good digital coverage. And so I'm no longer living on a property, so I miss the quiet. But I love the digital connection because I can catch up and I can watch all these TV shows. And so When I've just got 20 minutes to spare, I'll put an episode of Scrubs on because it makes me laugh, because it's really, really funny. Find the things that make you laugh. And I laugh at, like, I'll do something silly. I'll try and rake the lawn and then my back will go out and I'll just laugh at how stupid I was and I'll fall back. So I laugh at lots of things, and mostly I laugh at myself. I take what I do seriously, but I don't have to take me seriously. I love me. And in our way, God gives us an ability to laugh. So, you know, rip into it, because there's enough sadness to keep us going for a lifetime.
You're so right. Laughter and even smiling has been contributed to such great mental health and well-being, and it's heavily researched and documented. And one of the things I've started to introduce into my own life has been laughter. I've actually had to go and seek it, of course. I look at these cats or dogs, and now their owners have them tapping on their computer, and there's just some funny things out there where there was a cat singing to an Adele song. Just finding little things for a little micro moment of laughter, it makes you feel so good. What are some of your self-care rituals that you like to do that you feel that keep you balanced or healthy, mind, body, spirit?
With my professional life, I run a consultancy, and it's interesting because the older I get, the more successful it becomes, but I'm trying to pull back. So I've had to bring my son in so he can continue the work because it's so important, and he's been brilliant at picking it up, which is great. Well, I do live a busy lifestyle. For instance, in the last 3 months, I finished a PhD, I've launched a book, I've written another book, plus I'm running a busy practice. But I'm very mindful of the need to look after myself. So no matter where I am, and a lot of the time I work from home, I walk at least 60 to 90 minutes a day. Now, sometimes if I've got a really busy day, I'll break it up. Every 2 hours, I'll do 20 minutes. Other times I'll do a big hit. And when I'm at home, I'll also fit in 90 minutes of paddleboarding, which I really love. Paddleboarding, for those that have never tried it, if you can do it, it's the best exercise I've ever done because you don't really feel like you're exercising. It's more of a spiritual thing where you happen to be doing good cardio stuff. So even though I'm walking for 8 kilometres a day, it's still more spirit for me. I'm connecting. I walk on the beach, so there's always pelicans, there's eagles, there's other bird life that are showing themselves. Sometimes I'll see the dolphins showing themselves. Every now and then I'll see a whale breaching. And on the way, I'll see the gardens. You know, there's always all those things. So that's what I do. But in terms of practice, there's an acronym, FBUGS, that I can share with people that I live. And that's flaming bugs, if you want to remember it that way, F-bugs. And so these are the tips. I don't have F-bugs in the book, but the letters are in the book. So F stands for flow. So my life I allow to flow. So you look at nature, we aren't in the dark and suddenly the light is switched on and the daylight's there. It flows. The daylight flows in, and then we flow through the day, it warms up, and then we'll flow into the nighttime. So nature tells us that when we flow into the seasons, we flow. We don't suddenly go from summer to winter, we flow. And our life needs to flow. If your life is one of stop, start, you've got to think, what's going on there? I need to flow. So I flow in my life. I'm pretty cruisy. That doesn't mean there's times I don't paddle hard in the canoe. Sometimes I go really hard, but I'll know that's by choice and I know there's an end point. And then I'll just go back to flowing. So that's flowing. B stands for balance. You need balance in all things. I talked about work-life balance, but you need to think about it, and it's in the book. What are the critical things for my well-being? And I need to balance those things. And another way of looking at it, our old people say you need to hold on to your power. And our power sits in our belly. And it's about how we have control of what we choose to do with our lives. So, for instance, food, money, alcohol, sex, spirituality, entertainment, they're all good things, but if we're not careful, we can become consumed by them and they overtake our balance. So let's take alcohol, for instance. The way the old people describe it is, am I having a sip of wine or whatever I like because I'm happy or to make me happy? If I'm doing it because I'm happy, I'm in balance, that's great. If I'm doing it to make me happy, something's out of balance, I need to fix that. Am I on this phone because it's enabling me to add value to my life, to connect, to do something, or I'm doing it because I'm trying to avoid talking to people, or it's just a bad habit? If it's just a bad habit, I'm giving away my power to that. I need to stop that and put it away so I can bring my life back into balance. So that's B for balance. U stands for unity. So what can I do to support unity in my life? I find with all this technological advancement, it's creating greater siloism. So we need to think, okay, rather than text someone, should I call them? rather than call them, should I go and have coffee with them? We're all getting a little bit lazy about how we nurture relationships. And when we're out to the shops, do I nod at someone and just smile? I remember Christmas Eve 1 year ago, my wife and I went to the shops at 6 a.m. to beat all the rush. And I was the only husband smiling. There were all these other husbands walking up and down the aisle like they were about to be shot in the front of the firing squad. Whereas I loved it. It was early morning, and I love shopping because I love cooking and I love eating.
I'll quote this: "You've got a strong affection and warmth for travel, food, walking country, sports, movies, writing, and hot baths." Oh, I've got a lot of notes on you, Paul. I did a lot of research from your book.
You know me more than me. So create unity, and also unity with country and unity with other things. So that's unity. Then G stands for gratitude. We talked about gratitude. So have gratitude, and then S stands for story. So treasure your story, but also make the effort to learn about other people's stories. When you look at global warming, what that's about is, from an Aboriginal perspective, we were scientific. We needed truth, but it didn't control our life. Scientific methodology sat within a broader framework of arts and story. Story is about generating knowledge and truth. And so our old people knew the land and knew how to care for the land. And so we need to look at the truth in terms of global warming and saying, there is truth here. What are we going to do about it? Because it's not good. We've got to turn that around. And so that's about understanding the story of the land. When we have all these floods, the floods up in the North Coast region, an elder told me recently, he was up there when he was a boy, and an old fellow pointed to a tree and said, see the top of that tree? That mark there were the floods way back before Jesus was around. They're going to come back. We need to listen to those stories. So that's F-bugs. That's flow, balance, unity, gratitude, and story. They're automatic because I've been living them for so long now.
And it's really turned your life around, hasn't it? From rock bottom to burnout to now flourishing, where you feel content, at peace, well, and you have your books out, you've got your thriving business. Turning back to the ancient values and practices and your culture has transformed your life.
Yep.
At your height of your career, you weren't out in country or doing your 90-minute walk. Did that look very different for you?
Yes and no. As a CEO, and I do a lot of this when I provide my wellbeing workshops, and I have a lot of questions that enable people to do a diagnostic on themselves. I still set boundaries. So even as a CEO, again, my job does not define me. So even when I was a CEO, I had big responsibilities, but I kind of cordoned that off and said, well, they pay me money and they own me from, say, 9 in the morning of a Monday to Friday night, 9 o'clock. Weekends are me and family, and I'll only attend to things of the weekend if it's extraordinary. So that's the way I manage my life as an executive. And Wednesday nights, I still catch up and do cultural stuff. There were extraordinary times when I couldn't, but I still did that because we don't have to give our life away to success. So even though I became quite successful, in fact, I was less busy when I was the top of the tree than in the middle. I think middle management's the hardest because you're kind of the meat in the sandwich. You're getting whacked from above, you're getting whacked from below, you're trying to meet all sorts of people's needs. That's where I found it hardest, and that's where it's really important to set up boundaries. What I found in the last month with my book, a lot of corporates are getting me on board now to come and speak to them about wellbeing in the workplace. Because I have an accounting degree, because I've been a CEO, because I do strategic reviews, and I can talk their lingo, I can incorporate our ways into that. And that's why I became so grounded. It worked for me when I was in TAFE, my leadership style, which was one of organic leadership, where I would set up an executive around me that could do amazing things and I would empower them. But when I went into another part of government, it didn't work at all because they were into power and control. And the more I tried to reshape that, the more I got pushed out. When you talk about how things are going well, I've been through a lot of storms in my life. My career as a professional was ended not by me in 2013, where the pin was pulled. There was a group of Aboriginal people on a board that didn't want me around, and I was told that I had to go, and it meant my career was over. And even though I cried and it hurt me, a part of me spiritually went, okay, this is meant to be. I have to trust in this. So my wife and I, we had a massive mortgage. We're living in Sydney. We gave up her job. I didn't have a job. We moved back to the country and said, okay, we've got no income, we'll trust. And if worst comes to worst, we'll sell everything and start again, but we've got to walk our footsteps. that's one of the storms. I lost a younger brother to cancer not so many years ago. That was horrific.
Yes,
And
I'm so sorry to hear that.
And for those that are suffering right now and in the past, my condolences. You never get over that. Having said that, I made a promise to myself to learn from his life, to live my life every day, because he only had a young son that he left behind. And when I kissed him goodbye, he had a tear in his eye. It was incredibly sad. Just the last 24 hours, I've had the pleasure of his son spending time with me, and we went out paddleboarding yesterday. We went for a walk on the beach, and I could feel my brother Billy with me going, thank you, you know.
Yeah.
So again, there's these storms and this sadness, but you can also find the joy, because I felt that joy that I'm doing that, and he would have loved to have been here. And it just reminds me of how he would have felt. A couple of years ago, my youngest son cut his hand almost off making boomerangs. Now that was horrific. It was just hanging by a bit of meat. He was through the bones. And later we found he was 2 mils from bleeding out and dying in front of me. But thankfully, the hospital sewed him back together again. He has 90% of his hand use back, and he's excelling as a writer at university at the moment. And only 2 years ago, I cut my mum's thumb off in a farm accident, which was horrific. What I learned from that as I drove her to the hospital, she said, I'm so glad this didn't happen to you. And it showed me the love and respect of elders. And also, Mum said to the doctors, this is nothing compared to losing a son. So everything has context. So with me, I kind of shine with joy because I've wired myself that way. It's not Pollyanna, it's not halo. I choose not to be a victim, and I choose not to be cynical. Whilst I have a breath, I'm committed to sharing love and law with everyone I can, so they can see the beauty of the special gift they've been given, which is called life.
That was a really moving story then, Paul, when you reflected on your brother, the loss of your brother, but doing the walk with his son and feeling his presence with you. I nearly felt his presence there where he was saying, Paul, I'm so proud of you, brother.
He would be.
Yeah, getting this Dreaming Path book out. You're making world history here, because there ain't many books like this that you can pick up from the shelf to learn about Indigenous thinking to change your life. What I really love about your book is you've shared your own personal story, and we don't hear this from a lot of Australian men, regardless of what background you are, where they open up about their struggles. And I feel that your book is so great. Any guy should definitely grab it. It can help so many people on so many levels, whether you want to connect with Mother Earth, want to connect with yourself, want to take better care of yourself, just want to be part of the Aboriginal culture and turn it from what mainstream media at some point had made it out to be one of shame. And what I love about your book is you talk about the importance of loving yourself. And it's so important. There was such a great ritual in here where it was to stand in front of the mirror every day and say 3 things that you love about yourself. And you also talk about the importance of working on your own self-respect. This is something I've had to work on throughout my years. I only feel that probably the last couple of years where I can openly say on my podcast show or to other people, oh, my father's Aboriginal. I'm Aboriginal. Before, I was so embarrassed of that. I was ashamed. And why? And it was just because I'd heard other people say unkind words about the race, or I'd always see something on TV, they'd point out, or in the local news, they'd point out if someone stole something, it would be Aboriginal kid or Aboriginal person. But I used to always say, well, why don't they point out if it was a Greek person or an Italian person? So I always had this knowing that there was some singling out. And I thought if I could go under the radar and no one knew, oh, maybe they'd like me. And I thought, oh, if I could just go under the radar, because you can't really tell by looking at me, I thought I'd be just accepted and I'll fit in. And I was always frightened if someone found out I was Aboriginal, maybe they wouldn't like me. And that's a very unkind way of thinking, embarrassment, shame. And what I've learned along this journey, Paul, and your book actually really reiterated this, I was trying to fit in. So maybe if I drank with other people, whoa, I experienced wine for the first time at a corporate meeting in Brisbane and had a glass of wine. I remember the lady said to me, Yvette, would you like some wine? I was only 18, I think, at the time. I said, oh, okay. When I look at how I've redirected my life, I've gone back to the ancient values. So I know, say, my first ancestor, one, they didn't have McDonald's. Two, they didn't have wine, couldn't just buy this thing. So I thought, hang on a minute, if I just go back to the core values, which was healthy, fresh food, no substances. And so I learned, what if I go back to a couple of these basic things? Connect to country, feet in the sand, eat healthy, exercise, and not trying to fit in with everyone else. And it's been life transforming. You know what else has been? No longer being ashamed of who I am. That's been the biggest thing, because shame isn't a good place to be.
No, the toxic masculinity, I suffered from that when I was young. I played football, I played cricket, I drank a lot. The whole time I was being called the dumb black coon, the whole time. And I just took it on the chin because I was so desperate to be part of something, which is why I drank too much. I used to binge drink. I wasn't an alcoholic, but I'd binge. It was to cover my pain. And thankfully, when I had my breakdown, it forced me to take that Band-Aid off and look at it. And the really important story there for people is, as I tried to recover, I just prayed and I thirsted and yearned just to be the old me. But as I was given law and new insight that is there through this book for everyone, what happened without me knowing it is I overtook the old me and I became the real me. And that's what you're talking about. It's a hard journey. It shouldn't be, but it's a real hard journey to become the real me or the real you. It requires a lot of courage. It requires a lot of honesty. It requires a lot of letting go. But it's the most important thing you can do for yourself, to let it all go. And there's all sorts of labelling that gets placed upon us in society. For Aboriginal people, for hundreds of years, the research showed we're in the bottom of different cultural traits of who would be employed. People used to say employ everybody before Aboriginal people. We were the most labelled and vilified racial group in the country. It's really sad now that we're still there, but also we've been joined by other brothers and sisters from Africa and also from Muslim countries. The research is now showing they're being vilified as well. And so there are all sorts of marginalised people. There are people with disabilities, there are overweight people, there are people with red hair, there are people with blonde hair, there are people with no hair. Part of my book is to try and give insight and strength to anyone that feels isolated and marginalised, that your truth is beautiful. It comes from within, and don't let those externalities wear you down, because they're everywhere. The Australian ocherism, knock everybody, kneecap everybody, don't be a big noter, it's everywhere in Australian culture. It's almost held up as an heroic norm. And it's just not nice. My wife has a beautiful saying. She says, if you can't be anything, just be kind. Yeah. And if we can just be kind, the world would be a far better place, and Australia would be a far better place. And if we can join that up with understanding, tolerant, sharing, loving, respectful and humble, we'll have a pretty good place.
I agree. And I loved how you recognised your wife in your book, where you acknowledged her support and making your book happen, and her standing by you and being a pivotal part in you becoming an author. You talked about in this book that I'd love to share with our audience, which is spirituality. There is no competition.
I can't remember writing that.
I'll edit that part out, Paul. That's your best quote.
I'm happy for you to keep it in. It just shows you we don't have to be perfect. But it's exactly right. There is no competition. And this is the problem. Again, I mentioned it earlier. In the Western world, everything is a competition. We see television shows competing. We're competing, as I said, at school and for jobs. To the point you see spirituality is kind of competing. We need to be number one. If you don't follow us, then you're out. Gone. That's not our way at all. Aboriginal spirituality is, yes, we can bring in the beauty and the universal truth and wisdom from across the world, because at a point in time, everyone was Indigenous. And at a point in time, we were connected right across, because we're all born from the one mother. We are all one. There are big stories that we came from here and went out all over the world. And then in 1788, some of the lost children returned. We are all one. We are not separate. We can learn from each other and we can share. We don't have to fight each other. It's the same when we're in meetings. We don't have to fight each other to get a word in. We can sit down calmly and listen and then give some space. So in other parts of Australia, they use the term dadiri, and that is about resting in the silence and being quiet. So we can listen to each other, and from throughout the world, we can listen to each other and take in the wisdom. And through the wisdom will come learning. Through the learning comes growth. Through the growth comes unity. Through the unity comes global love and wellness. And that ties into the Aboriginal perspective of leadership. And Aboriginal perspective of leadership is I care for my place and all things in my place for my children's 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 children. So it's 4 generations. We think about what we're doing for those we'll never meet in physical form. Whereas the Western world is I must achieve delineated outcomes with resources within KPIs. It's a different way of thinking. So yes, we can be global, and it isn't a competition. Spirituality isn't a competition. It's the wisdom within it. So it's important for people to realise that with our phones, with our computers, we can get lots of information. Information is doubling at an incredible rate daily. But information is useless on its own. It needs to become knowledge. But even knowledge is useless if we don't convert it into wisdom. It's wisdom that makes the change. We can all spend a part of our day trying to become wiser. The old people say, if you come to me knowing nothing, I can give you everything. If you come to me knowing everything, I can give you nothing. That's another little practice where we can say, okay, I might want to talk a lot, but any given day I might spend a moment in silence having gratitude for what's around me, and I might spend another moment in silence listening to someone, and I might spend another moment trying to build wisdom, or they might all come together and give me that.
Spend a little bit of time with the younger generation. I feel they're quite disconnected because they don't spend as much time in the environment, in nature. It's very indoors. But I'm convinced being outdoors is a healer.
Yeah.
It's good for us.
Yeah, my consultancy work, I do a lot of work in mental health and Aboriginal mental health, and what's become quite clear with the system, it's dysfunctional and failing. And what is needed is early intervention at schools in what's called preventative mental health and mental health first aids. For all kids, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, what we need in the school system is the ability for our kids to be accessing this learning and walking in country with elders, where they are sharing, there becomes common understanding. We're breaking down the opportunities for racial labelling and all those kinds of things, and that builds this beautiful united ground for the future. So my hope is for the younger ones, I'm getting old in the tooth now, and so I've realised that I probably won't see the changes that I would like, but I can plant the seeds of the garden for future. So I spend a lot of my time, and so does Uncle Paul, growing the next generation who will grow the next generation. But also in terms of good news, I've got a book that's been written that I'm just going through the rewrite of now in targeting 9-year-olds that will come out January next year. And that's a play on what you said, you like the Dreamtime stories. I've written a lot of Dreamtime stories that are fun based on my research on what young kids are challenged by 9-year-olds. So that'll be out next January, and also with my PhD I've got 2 novels that target young adults from 18 to 25. So I'm covering the different age groups in different ways because I've realised in my own way of thinking that the messages are important, but they need to be delivered in different ways to different age groups.
I love that. I can't wait to catch up with you again, Paul Callaghan, when you launch these books, because I'm always fascinated. How can we help each other? One of the things is by sharing stories. So, yes. Paul, I could have talked to you forever. The podcast shows be going into 2 hours or a marathon at this rate. We'd be yarning all day. Paul, I want to ask you, before we say goodbye, what is your hope for your newfound book readers of The Dreaming Path?
Well, my hope is that they get something out of it that enables them to live a good story, because when we leave this world behind, all we leave behind is our story. So make it the best story possible. I hope it is worth the investment of someone's time, that when they read it, they can take something out of it, number one. And number two, I hope that once people take something out of it, they share what they have learned so other people will get it. And it isn't because I need lots of book sales to make me feel good. I'm really, really pleased with what I've achieved already. It's about creating this common learning amongst all people about Aboriginal culture and about the importance of unity, not only in Australia, but across the world. Chapter 8 in this book, as you know, is where I challenge leadership, and that is locally, but also globally, where we do need to create a better world for future generations. It's individual well-being and also global well-being, that's all.
That's a brilliant hope to have, Paul Callaghan, and we'll give Uncle Paul Gordon a shout out too, because he was pivotal in this book, your
Yes.
co-author. Congratulations again, Paul, on the book. It's a brilliant read. It's a must-read book for every Australian, but anyone in the world. Now, Paul, how can we stay in touch with you after this podcast show?
You just go to my website, www.culturalconsultancy.com.au.
Paul, thanks again for being a guest on the podcast show. It's been lots of fun. I've learnt so much and I'm super grateful.
Wonderful to spend time with you, my sister, and let's do it again.
Thanks, Paul. Well, we'll say goodbye to Paul Callaghan. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast show and that you learnt a lot. Be sure to share it far and wide and leave a 5-star rating and review and to tell someone you love to. And together, let's feel good from within.